The first thing I did when I was reborn was to break off the engagement with Tom. In my previous life, I worked hard for Tom for most of my life. When I was terminally ill, he couldn't even wait for me to pass away, and was secretly planning a silver-haired wedding with Daisy. Their wedding, my funeral. I won't be so foolish in this life. Just as Tom was fighting with his family to resist the marriage, and ran off to Daisy's house to wait for her and her mother, I went to the family home. Ashley, marrying into the family was your grandfather's last wish, and it was a marriage arranged by both families long ago. Mr. Ken pulled out the yellowed marriage contract. I read it over and over a few times, and my gaze finally landed on the man behind him. If I absolutely have to marry in half a month, then I choose him. Everyone fell silent when I proposed to marry Henry. Mr. Ken was even more shocked. Ashley, marriage is not a joke. You and Tom were betrothed since you were babies. You grew up together as childhood sweethearts. How can you just say you're not marrying him and want to marry Henry instead? Mr. Ken was right. I always knew I would become Tom's wife when I grew up. For so many years, my greatest wish was to marry him. But he never loved me. In my previous life, Tom couldn't go against the Ken family's arrangements and reluctantly married me. The first thing he said to me after we got married was, "Ashley, since you pestered me into marrying you, you better be prepared for the fact that I will never fall in love with you in this lifetime." At the time, I just thought he was saying it out of anger. After all, feelings can develop over time. I didn't believe he had no feelings for me after all these years. I especially didn't believe he would remain so cold to me after we got married. But I was wrong. After Tom and I got married, Daisy went south, and she instead became an unforgettable regret in his heart. Even when we were in our 60s, he would often look at the old love letters he wrote to Daisy in his study and cry alone. Until just before I died, he told me with a gloomy face, "If I hadn't promised Grandpa back then that I would never divorce you, I would have married Daisy a long time ago. You're the one who broke us up." Only then did I realize that it wasn't just that he didn't love me. He hated me to the bone. He even went so far as to marry Daisy in a high-profile and extravagant manner on the day of my funeral. So in this life, I will absolutely not repeat the same mistakes. Grandpa Ken, I'm not kidding. Anyway, when the families arranged the marriage back then, they only said I had to marry into the Ken family. They didn't say I had to marry Tom, right? Henry was Mr. Ken's youngest son, born when Mr. Ken was in his 50s, only 5 years older than Tom. I remember in my previous life, after Mr. Ken passed away, Uncle Ken went abroad, and was said to have never married. My impression of him was only that he was a very quiet and reserved man. Because he was a generation older than Tom and me, he had always been like a little adult since we were young. I hadn't heard of him having any marriage contract with anyone, nor had I heard of him having a first love hidden in his heart. Since I had to marry anyway, and since it would be a loveless marriage anyway, it was better to marry a husband I could respect, rather than end up resenting each other. Seeing my determined attitude, Mr. Ken sighed. "That's true, but we still need to see what Henry thinks." Henry maintained a straight posture, his white shirt ironed without a single wrinkle. I saw him suddenly frown, and my heart instantly leaped into my throat. I was indeed too hasty just now, only focused on escaping that disaster Tom, and forgot to ask for Henry's opinion. He would probably refuse me, right? But unexpectedly, the next second Henry suddenly spoke. "As long as you've thought it through, I have no objections." When Mr. Ken heard this, he instantly beamed with joy. "Good. Then the wedding will proceed as planned in half a month. Everything at the Grand Hotel is already arranged anyway. I already said I won't marry Ashley." Before Mr. Ken could finish speaking, Tom angrily pushed open the door. He glared at me with disgust, then said to Mr. Ken, "Grandpa, what era is this? Arranged marriages are old feudal ideas. If you don't let me marry Daisy, I'll never come back to the Ken family." The sound of the storytelling on the radio was drowned out by Mr. Ken slamming his hand on the table in anger. "How many times have I told you? A woman like Daisy who had a child out of wedlock is not fit to enter our Ken family's doors. You chase after that woman all day long. You have no idea how my old comrades laugh at me." Tom had long been infatuated with Daisy and couldn't allow anyone to say a bad word about her, even if that person was his grandfather. Anyway, I will only marry Daisy in this lifetime. Worst case, I'll move into the staff dormitory and never come back to the Ken family." Tom turned around angrily, and as he passed me, he said viciously, "No matter how much you complain to Grandpa, it's useless. I won't marry you. You better give up that idea." It turned out Tom thought I came to the Ken family to force the marriage. Little did he know that my biggest wish in this life was to completely stay away from him. "Don't go after him." Mr. Ken stopped the nanny, took a sip of tea to calm himself down. "He's just spoiled by me. Isn't he trying to cut ties with the Ken family for a woman? Then let him." Tom was indeed stubborn enough and moved directly into the school's staff dormitory. I often ran into him and Daisy in the school cafeteria. A colleague who was on good terms with me complained indignantly for me. "Ms. Ashley, it's bad enough that Mr. Ken arranged for Daisy to be a substitute teacher at our school. But now that you two are about to get married, they're still inseparable. People who don't know might think she's the one marrying Mr. Ken." I smiled faintly and continued to eat my food with my head down. "It doesn't matter, I'm not marrying him anyway." "What?" My voice was very low, and my colleague didn't hear clearly at first. But I just shook my head gently and said no more. Before marrying Henry, I didn't want to cause any more trouble. As for him and Daisy, they had nothing to do with me anymore. Since I wasn't marrying Tom, I had no reason to continue living in the marital home Mr. Ken had prepared for us. Previously, Mr. Ken felt sorry for me and specifically let me move into the new house by myself, saying it was close to the school and the neighborhood was safe. But now I decided to move out. Unexpectedly, as soon as I went upstairs, I found my personal belongings thrown messily in the hallway. "Ms. Ashley, you're back? I'm so sorry, Tom asked me to move in with my daughter. I didn't have space for your things, so I temporarily put them in the hallway." Daisy was wearing a floral dress, her arms crossed, completely blocking the doorway, looking every bit the mistress of the house. "You know, the apartment building has all sorts of people. Tom didn't want us to suffer, so please inconvenience yourself and move out first." In my previous life, Tom had also brought Daisy back to our marital home and kicked me out. At that time, I was devastated and heartbroken, hysterically questioning Tom why he would let another woman sleep in our marital home. But he just sneered at me and said, "We're not married yet. When did it become your place, an outsider, to dictate things in the Ken family's house?" But this time, I felt no emotional turmoil at all. Seeing me silently packing my things without saying a word, Daisy became a little restless. "Aren't you jealous? Aren't you afraid that Tom will marry me instead of you in the end?" I looked up and gave her a cold glance. Daisy had never heard such harsh words before. She paused for a moment, and her eyes instantly turned red. "Who are you calling names?" Tom came over when he heard the noise. After seeing Daisy cry, he immediately insisted that I had bullied her. "Ashley, isn't it just asking you to move out temporarily? Do you have to be so aggressive? Or are you marrying me just for our Ken family's money?" Tom was always like this, extremely conceited. Once he made up his mind about something, no one could change it. I didn't want to get entangled with them any longer, so I turned and left. I could still hear Tom rambling on behind me. "Ashley, a woman like you can forget about dreaming of marrying me. I definitely won't show up for the wedding in half a month. Just wait to be embarrassed." I moved back to the staff dormitory to avoid contact with Tom and the others. Rumors about the two of them were flying all over the school. Almost everyone who passed me would cast sympathetic glances my way. Until a week later, the principal suddenly called me to his office. He pointed to a letter on the table, his expression serious. "Ms. Ashley, someone has reported to the higher-ups that your manuscript for the previous teacher's writing competition was plagiarized. The higher-ups are taking this matter very seriously." Faced with this sudden accusation, I felt completely bewildered. "Principal, every word in that article was my own. How can it be considered plagiarism? And who did I plagiarize from?" The principal sighed, seemingly helpless as well. "The accuser produced drafts and outlines. Even if I wanted to suppress this matter, I can't. Why don't you take a leave of absence and rest for a few days?" I heard a loud ringing in my head. As I walked out of the principal's office in a daze, I saw Daisy at the door. I instantly understood what was going on. Most of my things were in the marital home. Other than Daisy, I couldn't think of a second person who would take my drafts to report me for plagiarism. Was it you? Seeing that no one was around, Daisy smiled smugly. So what if it was me? You can't blame others for misplacing your own things. I felt like I was shaking with anger. But Daisy still had that smug look of a petty person who got her way. Ashley, you stole my man, so don't blame me for stealing your position. If you don't leave, how can I, a substitute teacher, get a permanent position? So that was her real goal. Just as I was about to confront her further, the principal called her into his office. In a fit of anger, I went to the higher-ups and requested them to reinvestigate the matter, but the official told me, someone has already proven that your manuscript indeed plagiarized someone else's original work. You should go back and wait for the disciplinary action. The result of the disciplinary action was that I was fired from the school. The principal told me that if it weren't for my previous hard work, I wouldn't have escaped a public criticism session. How ridiculous! The original author was kicked out of school, while the real plagiarist was triumphantly promoted to a permanent teacher. I showed up uninvited to the celebration banquet Tom prepared for Daisy. When I poured a glass of wine over Daisy's head, Tom dragged me out of the restaurant. Ashley, what are you freaking out about? Isn't it just a teaching position? Daisy is having a hard time raising her child alone. What's the big deal if you let her have it? If you still want to marry me, then stop causing trouble for her. It turned out that Tom also knew I was the one who was plagiarized. Or perhaps he was the one who helped Daisy prove it. I slapped Tom hard across the face. Tom, you make me sick. Don't worry, I will absolutely not marry you in this lifetime. But Tom just thought I was saying it out of anger. After all, in his heart, how could someone who had revolved around him since childhood just give up like that? I originally thought he would never bow his head to me, never admit his mistake. But unexpectedly, 3 days later, Tom relented in front of me for the first time. Ashley, Daisy was just too desperate to stay at the school, so she impulsively took your manuscript. I apologized to you on her behalf. After being fired from school, I could only move back to my family's old house. Tom looked a little awkward standing downstairs in the crowded old apartment building. Daisy is now being accused of getting into the school through connections. I admit I pulled some strings, but she also has the talent to stay, right? Talent? The talent of secretly accepting red envelopes from parents, or turning a blind eye to the children of wealthy families. I scoffed and continued to look at Tom silently. As long as you come forward and prove that the article was indeed Daisy's original work, and that you plagiarized her, she can stay. This was the first time Tom had ever apologized to me. But I never expected it would be for another woman. I never expected him to say such shameless things. Get out. I turned my face away, unwilling to say another word to him. The day after tomorrow is my wedding with Henry. I still have many things to prepare, and no time to waste on such a person. But it seemed to have wounded Tom's pride. I bet you were the one who reported her behind her back, right? Ashley, you're such a despicable woman. Let me tell you, if you help her this one time, I'll agree to marry you. You better think it over carefully. It turned out that in Tom's heart, marrying me was actually a gift to me. Too bad, I didn't care for it. The next day, my best colleague said she wanted to treat me to a meal. Foreigners all have bachelorette parties. I'll throw one for you too. I couldn't refuse her, and went to the restaurant with her. When I went to the restroom halfway through, I suddenly heard a familiar voice from the private room next door. It was Tom. If it weren't for Daisy, I wouldn't marry that woman. I get annoyed just looking at her. Through the half-open door, I saw Tom with his arm around Daisy, eagerly trying to show his loyalty. Don't worry, besides you, I will absolutely not fall in love with anyone else. Marrying her tomorrow is just to deal with the old man at home. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy to pull strings to protect you. Daisy leaned shyly in his arms. The more her friends around them teased, the redder her face became. Perhaps it was also because I had just had a few glasses of low-alcohol wine, and the alcohol went to my head, making me suddenly feel aggrieved. I thought my heart was already dead. But when I saw Tom shamelessly belittling me in front of another woman, I still felt a pang in my heart. So this was the Tom of his 20s. Foolish, arrogant, ridiculous. After spending decades with him, I had almost forgotten what he was like when he was young. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Tom, you don't need to show up for tomorrow's wedding. The next day, my wedding with Henry went on as usual. The arriving guests were stunned at first. They all thought I would marry Tom, but they didn't expect the groom to have changed. But due to the Ken family's status, no one dared to say much. They all smiled and offered words of blessing. As Henry and I were making toasts at each table, Tom finally arrived late. He was accompanied by Daisy in a long red dress, just like in the previous life. To prove that he was forced to marry me, Tom deliberately disappeared from the wedding scene that day. The groom was absent. This made me a laughingstock in everyone's eyes. If Mr. Ken hadn't taken charge of the situation, I probably would have broken down on the spot. Not only that, he also deliberately had Daisy wear an outfit similar to the bride's. On stage, her eyes never left him for a second. Anyone with eyes could see what was going on. For the sake of so-called decency, in my previous life, I endured this humiliation. But this time it was completely different. Tom looked at Henry beside me. Utterly astonished, he said, "Uncle, why are you wearing the groom's clothes?" Henry looked at his loss of composure. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Of course I have to wear groom's attire for my wedding. You, on the other hand, reek of alcohol. You didn't even change your clothes. What do you look like?" Tom's eyes widened. His expression froze. "What do you mean? Isn't today my wedding?" Mr. Ken, who was beside them, sneered. He slammed his cane on the ground with a bang. "Didn't you not want to get married? Now your wish has been granted, and you're still not satisfied?" Tom shook his head in disbelief. He turned to look at me. He said sharply, "Ashley, did you say something to my grandpa and uncle? Or did you pull some tricks? I knew you were no good. I didn't want Tom to ruin my wedding." Just as I was about to speak, I saw Henry step forward and block me. His tone carried an undeniable sense of pressure. "Is the name Ashley something you can call her? According to seniority, you should call her your younger aunt." Tom stumbled back several steps in disbelief. Daisy, who was behind him, almost fell as well. "Tom, that's great. Your grandpa isn't forcing you to marry Ashley. Then we can get married." Daisy's face was full of longing. She practically had "I want to marry into the Ken family" written on her face. But as soon as she finished speaking, Mr. Ken snorted coldly. "Not just any woman can marry into our Ken family. Tom, let me tell you, if you want to marry such a disreputable woman, it'll be over my dead body." Daisy's tears instantly fell. She bit her lip hard, as if she couldn't accept such humiliation. But Tom, who was beside her, was still in a daze. "Tom, didn't you promise you would marry me? How can you allow your family to humiliate me like this?" For a moment, Tom was in a dilemma. The surrounding guests also began to whisper among themselves, pointing fingers at Daisy. "Isn't that old Bai's daughter? I heard she ran off with some wild man a few years ago. When she came back, she was already pregnant. She drove her parents to their graves from anger. Looks like she still wants to marry into the Ken family. She doesn't even consider her own status." Daisy's face turned red and pale. She stomped her foot hard. She turned around, covered her face, and ran out. Only then did Tom react. He first asked Mr. Ken why he wasn't told about the groom change for the wedding. But Mr. Ken said, "I called your school several times. But didn't you think it was to force you to come back and get married? So you kept not answering? I also wrote you several letters. Weren't all of them returned by you?" Tom's face instantly turned deathly pale. He stood there, at a loss. In the end, he still decided to chase after Daisy. Fortunately, the unpleasant little interruption did not affect the overall flow of the wedding. That night, I sat on the wedding bed. My face was redder than the bright red bedspread. But I finally asked the question that had puzzled me for a long time. "Was it you who reported Daisy to the higher-ups?" Other than Henry, I couldn't think of anyone else who would help me. No one else had. His kind of ruthless decisiveness to directly get Daisy fired from the school. Henry nodded quietly. His expression was still calm. "Since you married me, I won't let you suffer any more grievances. I've also spoken to the school. As long as you want, you can go back to class anytime." But this time I hesitated. It wasn't because if I went back, I would have to see Tom all the time. But rather, in my previous life, it wasn't until after I retired that I realized, actually, I didn't particularly like this job. I want to see if I can get into a newspaper office. I hesitated and told Henry my thoughts. I was worried that he, like many men, wouldn't want his wife to be out in public after getting married. But Henry didn't object. Okay, as long as you like it. Just go ahead and do it. If it doesn't work out, you still have me. When I stuffed the prepared manuscript into the small slot of the mailbox, I felt a little uneasy. If the manuscript gets accepted, then I'll have an advantage in the newspaper interview. Passing by the department store, I suddenly remembered. Henry seemed to only have white shirts, only this style of clothing, so I thought of helping him choose a suitable piece of fabric. Unexpectedly, I ran into Tom and Daisy. Daisy was intimately holding Tom's arm. Her finger pointed at me. The one I just selected. That's the one. Wrap it up for me. I just felt unkinky. Even the fabric that I thought looked good just now seemed dull. I put the fabric coupon back in my pocket. I turned to the salesperson. I smiled. Give it to her. After all, some people just like to snatch what others don't want. Daisy was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She instantly bristled. Don't be a sore loser. When you were chasing after Tom, you weren't so proud. I looked Tom up and down. I sneered him. Tom, who had been silent, now had a gloomy expression. Ashley, don't think you're so great just because you married my uncle. Didn't you just rely on that marriage certificate? Forcing your way into our kin family? Daisy is different from you. She only loves me. She doesn't care about my family background at all. I saw Daisy. A barely perceptible awkwardness flickered across her face, but she quickly suppressed it. She continued to act as if her eyes were only for Tom. Sweetly leaning on his shoulder, she said, actually, I should thank you. Otherwise, Tom and I wouldn't have been able to be together, soulmates that we are. From now on, we're family. When the baby is born, don't forget to come for a drink. Daisy gently caressed her lower abdomen. A maternal smile appeared on her face. Deliberately trying to disgust me, Daisy's intentions weren't hard to guess. She wanted to use this child to get into the kin family. I just think a dog really can't change its ways. Is getting pregnant before marriage something to be proud of? It's just that times are better now. A few years ago, you both would have been locked up. After I said this, I walked straight past them. As I expected, Tom told Mr. Ken within 2 days. He wanted to marry Daisy. Chapter 1 said, as long as I'm alive, don't even think about him entering my kin family's door. Mr. Ken was so angry with Tom that he was out of breath. But Tom was still stubbornly arguing. Grandpa, everyone advocates for freedom and love now. Besides, Daisy is pregnant with my child. That's our kin family's blood. But he didn't expect that. Mr. Ken was even angrier after hearing this. What do you call a child born out of wedlock? It's called a bastard. My kin family. How did we raise such a shameless thing like you? Mr. Ken got angrier as he spoke. Later, he even picked up his cane. He hit Tom hard on the leg. If you really want to marry her, then get out of the Ken family as soon as possible. And never come back. Tom was kicked out of the Ken family. He took Daisy with him. They had their wedding in our previous marital home. But the only people who attended were his scoundrel friends. If Tom was really smart, he should have known. The reason people outside gave him face before was simply because he was a member of the Ken family. But after he publicly announced his separation from the Ken family, who would really respect him? Even Daisy nagged him daily for being incompetent. A teacher's salary and subsidies weren't enough to buy 2 meters of fabric. Before long, Tom came back dejectedly. He apologized to Mr. Ken. But Mr. Ken had always been a man of his word. He only had the security guard leave him a message. You can bring the child back. Unnecessary people shouldn't even think about entering the Ken family's door. And he kept Tom locked outside the Ken family gate. He didn't let him take a single step inside. Meanwhile, I just received a notification from the newspaper office. I can start working there next month. Life really seemed to be getting better. In the days without Tom, I saw a different sky. That day, when I was coming home from work, I heard a few colleagues gossiping on the side. Gossip, have you heard? That grandson of the Ken family got cheated on. I know. Isn't the other man that principal from the school next door? I heard his wife caught them in bed. When Daisy and the principal were caught in bed, they weren't even wearing clothes. This kind of scandal, in that era of scarce entertainment, quickly spread everywhere, especially since the principal's wife was a fiery-tempered woman. After catching the two in bed, she sat on the floor and wailed loudly. Basically, all the neighbors heard it. The reason Daisy got involved with the principal was to get back into the school. It makes sense. With Tom's salary, it wasn't enough for her and her daughter to spend lavishly. Moreover, she was now pregnant with another child. This kind of thing is no small matter. The principal's wife called her family and dragged the two of them to the police station. The principal was having an affair. He was fired from the school. Considering Daisy was still pregnant and had no job, she was let go after a few reprimands. But the principal's wife was unwilling to let him off. She threw dung at Tom's doorstep every day. She used every disgusting trick in the book. Tom was already unable to hold his head high because of Daisy. Now he absolutely couldn't stand it anymore. Grandpa, I was wrong. Tom knelt before Mr. Ken. He lowered his head, a rare occurrence. Although Mr. Ken was still angry, he couldn't bear to really kick Tom out. He still let him return to the Ken family. This led to some awkwardness when Tom and I interacted. Ashley, I was wrong about what happened before. I didn't expect Daisy to be that kind of woman. In my impression, Tom had always been successful and proud. Even as he got older, he always stood tall and proud. But now he looked like he had aged 10 years. The gossip weighed him down, making him unable to stand straight. It's all in the past, I said lightly, my tone devoid of any emotion. If I still hated him before. But now I was married to Henry, engaged in work I enjoyed, watching Tom reap what he sowed. I truly didn't hate him anymore. You only hate when you care. I don't care about him at all now. So where would the hate come from? Ashley, Tom hesitated, but he still said it. I know you and my uncle don't have any feelings for each other. I was wrong about what happened in the past. We were the real childhood sweethearts. If you're willing to divorce my uncle, I can. I'm not willing. Before he could finish, I interrupted him directly. Am I some object to be summoned and dismissed at will? Only when he, Tom, was abandoned by others and was down and out, would he think of me. It's truly ridiculous. Tom, I'm doing very well now. I looked him in the eyes, my expression serious. Word by word I said, who said Henry and I don't have feelings for each other? In my heart, he's 1,000 times, 10,000 times better than you. Also, remember your status. Next time we meet, you have to call me little auntie. After saying this, I turned and walked away. I didn't even want to spare him another glance. Looks like it's time to persuade Henry to move out. After all, living under the same roof with a former fiancé. This doesn't sound good. If word gets out, people might laugh. As I passed the corner, suddenly, a pair of hands pulled me into an embrace. It was actually Henry. Let's move out. I don't know how long he had been secretly listening, but now Henry held me tightly in his arms. His tone was firm. I struggled to lift my head and teased, is he jealous? Henry didn't speak, but I saw his ears turn red. Our move was very smooth. Mr. Ken was also a reasonable person. After hearing Henry's decision, he didn't say a single word of objection. But on the day we officially moved, an uninvited guest arrived at the Ken family's doorstep. Tom, come out here. Daisy's belly was already showing a bit by now. She was still wearing that same floral dress from before. However, her swollen body made the originally somewhat fitted dress look somewhat ill-fitting. You got my belly big, and then you left me alone outside. Shameless. I'm going to report you for being a hooligan. You better come out here quickly. Otherwise, I'm going to barge in. I'd like to see who dares to stop me when I'm this pregnant. The security guards at the Ken family's gate all looked troubled, but they still stood firm at the gate, not letting Daisy in. Finally, just as Daisy was about to start cursing again, Tom came out. I haven't even said anything about you cheating on me. And you have the nerve to come to my house. Tom was so angry with Daisy that his face turned beet red. If someone hadn't stopped him, he probably would have rushed at Daisy and done something irreparable. Me cheat? Wasn't it for our family? If it weren't because you're a kin, do you think I would be with you? I didn't expect you to be like trash. Kicked out by the kin family. If I don't go back to teaching, with your measly salary, are we supposed to live on air? Tom was perhaps seeing Daisy's true colors for the first time. He was speechless from her scolding. I watched from the side for a while. I lost interest in this dog-eat-dog drama. Just as I was about to turn around and continue with the move, unexpectedly, Daisy rushed over to me in a flash. Ashley, did you meddle in this? Is that why Mr. Ken won't let me into the Ken family? He grabbed my arm tightly. I couldn't break free for a moment. I looked around. I didn't see Henry anywhere. For a moment, I panicked a little. What are you freaking out about? Let go. But Daisy acted as if she hadn't heard. She continued to talk to herself, seeing me so miserable. You must be very pleased, right? So what if you married Henry? What's so great about it? Frankly, what's the difference between you and me? Aren't we both women who rely on men by spreading our legs? If I'm not having a good time, you can forget about having a good time either. Daisy became ruthless. She pushed me to the ground. I don't know if it was intentional or accidental. My head hit a rock. Instantly, everything went black and I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Henry's guilt-ridden face. He looked like he hadn't rested for a long time. His once smooth chin now had a beakinish stubble. Ashley, you're awake. I'm sorry I didn't protect you well. It won't happen again. Are you uncomfortable anywhere else? Does your head still hurt? This was the first time I heard Henry say so many words at once. I looked at him amusedly. I shook my head. Just as I was about to sit up, Henry suddenly sprang up from his chair. He fumbled to help me with the pillow. He got me water and tucked me in. Seeing him so nervous, I couldn't help but tease. I just fell. It's not a big deal. At most, I'll have a scar on my head. But I didn't expect Henry to be kinched instantly. He stammered for a long time. Finally, he said, "You're going to be a mother soon. It's better to be careful." Overwhelmed by the sudden joy, I repeatedly asked him for confirmation in disbelief. Really? Are we really having a baby? As Henry nodded again and again, I finally realized. In my belly, there really was a tiny life, silently growing. This was the first time in my 2 lifetimes that I was going to be a mother. I was so happy that everything felt a bit unreal. Until someone knocked on the door at an inappropriate time. "Uncle, I want to talk to him." Henry looked at me, asking for my opinion with his eyes. I gave him a reassuring look. Only then did Henry walk out confidently. But I noticed outside the door the corner of his clothes that he hadn't managed to hide. "Eshi, I'm sorry. I didn't expect him to do that to you." I quietly looked at Tom without saying a word. I know I've done a lot of things to wrong you in the past. These past few days, I've been thinking about all our previous interactions. Only then did I realize how good you are. But now it's too late. Everything I needed to say to Tom, I had already said it last time. He should also know. I'm a person who, once I've made a decision, won't change it. Especially now that I'm pregnant with Henry's child. So his coming over this time, it probably wasn't just for an apology. Seeing that I remained silent, Tom finally revealed the true purpose of his visit. "I know you definitely won't forgive me now, but I beg you, can you let Daisy go? Grandpa is very angry now. Daisy's days ahead will not be easy, but she's carrying my child in her belly. That is, after all, my Tom's child." A look of pain crossed Tom's face. His eyes were fixed on me, his face pleading. "Please, Ashley, as long as you can help me plead with Grandpa, I will definitely make it up to you tenfold in the future." Looking at him like this, I suddenly felt that Tom was also quite pathetic. Not only cheated on by a woman, but also deceived like a fool. But I wasn't that kind. To protect his so-called innocence, I smiled, seeing my attitude soften. A flame of hope instantly lit up on Tom's face. However, my next sentence was, "Since you are my nephew, Then as an elder, I advise you to find a way to get a paternity test. Considering that medical technology wasn't very advanced at the time, I added, if that's not possible, you can also get yourself checked out. In my previous life, even if Tom didn't love me anymore, but as husband and wife, some normal human interactions were unavoidable. We never had children our whole lives. It was because of Tom. He couldn't. So when I found out Daisy was pregnant, I knew Tom had been cheated on. And cheated on very thoroughly. I didn't say anything at the time, because I thought, anyway, I would have nothing to do with them in the future. Less trouble is better. But now that Daisy has provoked me, don't blame me for fighting back. After Tom heard my words, he first widened his eyes in disbelief. He asked me why I would say that. At first, he still suspected I was just talking nonsense. He kept asking, but I refused to say another word. Tom gradually lost his confidence. He shook his head and ran out like a madman. The next time I heard Tom's name, it was in the newspaper. Tom killed Daisy. In the marital home where I once lived, he placed a basin of charcoal. By the time someone found them, they had long stopped breathing. Originally, Tom wouldn't have been so extreme. But when he confronted Daisy, Daisy shouted out that he couldn't perform. The neighbors around easily heard it. This matter soon spread throughout most of the city. Mr. Ken, a white-haired man, sending off a black-haired man mourning his grandson. Henry and I originally wanted to bring him over to take care of him, but he firmly refused. He said that just having us visit often was enough. And then, the young granddaughter tilted her head. Her pigtails hung down by her ears. Extremely cute. Then, before I could finish speaking, I heard a voice from the kitchen. Stop telling stories. Come and eat quickly. I made your favorite squirrel-shaped mandarin fish today. Then I smiled and stroked my granddaughter's cheek. Then your grandpa will call us to eat. Holding my granddaughter's hand, I walked step by step into the living room. I saw Henry holding a plate of squirrel-shaped mandarin fish, smiling gently at me. The end.